Love is a high-risk behavior.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the podcast, High Risk for Heartbreak. I am your host, Christina, and I am so glad you decided to join me today. Welcome to day 5 of our mini-series that we are doing on creating space for the gift of love this holiday season. This holiday season is extending from Thanksgiving all the way through the new year for me, so I don't know about you guys, but I like to stretch it out, okay? So in the last few episodes, we have been just doing some personal work of identifying areas where our heart may be hardened within our relationships. We also created a plan for change. We talked about prayer and fasting. We talked about fitness and exercise, ways to get out some of this negative energy that we might be carrying with us, ways to kind of work through our offense. And so today we are actually going to talk about how old habits die hard. And I know you know what I'm talking about. So where do we start? Old habits, they die hard and they won't go away overnight. But if you have decided to create a plan, you can start. So we start. On day 1, we created the space to receive the gift of love again. This is just a mindset shift, deciding that we want to receive the gift of love again after heartbreak. You may have recognized the state that your heart condition is in. And then you took a mini assessment of different areas where relationships and things within your life, where heartbreak maybe was scarring over those. We talked about the deep scar tissue and how hard it is to break it up and how painful that is. And potentially maybe holding you back from experiencing the fullness of life in your loving relationships the way God intended. And then you pinpointed the parts of your heart that may be hardened due to heartbreaks, and you made the decision to change that. I think that's a very big thing, making a decision to change and soften yourself up again. Planned change is what you asserted next. You created a plan that will help you undergird this new decision and support this new decision that you are making room for the gift of love. So now where do you go? You go absolutely nowhere. You now start the process of personal dissection. And that means removing parts of you to make room for other better parts of you to come. For many of us, this is going to take a bit of elbow grease and a bit of a warm up to the decisions that we have made. And then you're going to have to start incorporating some of these new commitments into your life. I'm not a therapist, but I have been fortunate enough to experience a couple of major heartbreaks and a bunch of smaller ones in my life, and they have served me in the long term. Though in the short term, they were extremely painful lessons. They forced me to recognize patterns and behaviors that were trying to keep me relationally stagnant. For example, I had a fear of a loss of myself, a fear of being manipulated or controlled by someone. These agreements have caused me to show up in relationships, all of them, in a way that doesn't allow the blood to necessarily flow through the vein of the relationship. I recognize that I'm acting from fear because of past traumatic events in my earlier years. And while I desire intimate relationships, I don't desire them to ever look like my past traumas. So that made me controlling. It makes me critical, right? So these are some of the things that have shown up, makes me judgmental. I'm not doing these things only to others. I actually do them to myself. And this is all part of this trauma response, or this is all part of the response to keep myself alive and to survive at the end of the day. However, it doesn't work if you want to have loving relationships. So I can't treat them, my new relationships especially, like they are or ever will be like my traumas, because they're not. I hope this is making sense. I have pinpointed a couple of areas that I have the responsibility of addressing despite what was done to me. And this is a really big thing, especially for those who have experienced a lot of heartbreaks, maybe major heartbreaks like betrayal or whatever it might be, maybe the loss of someone through death or through maybe not death, because I know that can also be just as painful. And it's particularly hard to deal with the fact that these things have happened to you, but there's also some level of responsibility that we might have played in, I wouldn't say the death part, but in other types of losses, relational losses that we have. We all have a responsibility to our relationship. So it couldn't just only be the other person. This especially is important though, because it impacts how you live out your relationships with others. So you have to be able to recognize this. So in this personal time of dissection, you have to be able to sit with yourself and note your old ways of being, your old thoughts and your old lifestyles that have you operating from whatever space you're operating from. For me, it would be operating from fear. You have to be able to see the right in the things that you do and the things that you did, and the responsibility also for those things. And then sometimes you will discover that you actually were quite wrong and destructive, per my previous example. So how do you identify and counteract those states that have become lifestyles by coming out of agreement with them? How do you do that? If I am fearful, then how do I become brave? Usually, I would just kind of face something head on that makes me afraid, right? And I think this is a great rudimentary example and definitely can work. And I think it works really well for children who are developing their sense of self and their ego. However, I think as adults, there may be a better approach for us who are learning to navigate relationships. Think about Thanksgiving dinner. You don't want to try a new recipe on Thanksgiving Day, right? You don't want to try a new recipe on people, especially in the midst of your relationships. You may want to kind of work on that recipe first. You want to get good at it. So that's what we are doing here. So if you want to become brave, you have to incorporate things on the daily into your life that make you fearful, right? Relationally paralleling those things. Sometimes the doing is in knowing why each step leads to the next. If you know them well, then you know why they work. That's why we're breaking everything down. I'll give you an example of how you can make this work for you. I fear the loss of a sense of self in my marriage. Why? Well, because I have seen women who have lost themselves building their husbands and their families and their children. And then they get a divorce and then they have to rebuild this whole new identity. They don't even know who they are anymore. So what does that mean for you? Well, that same thing will happen to me. Who would let that happen? Me? Why? Why would you let that happen? I won't. I will make sure not to fully commit to being a wife and a mother. Is that the best way that you can show up for yourself and for your family? No, but it protects me. Is that healthy for your family? No. So could there be some other way that you can be healthy for both you and your family? Have you ever sat down and asked yourself about something that you do within your relationships or something that people have close to you have brought to your attention? Have you ever worked the recipe? Have you worked it through enough, understanding why one step leads to the next and leads to the next and then amounts into this beautiful recipe, this beautiful dish? Houses are built starting with the foundation first for a reason. Recipes start with gathering the ingredients first for a reason. So we start with dissecting and deconstructing these clay houses piece by piece because we're not getting rid of the whole thing. Some of these things actually do serve a purpose, but we are going to get rid of the things that don't serve a purpose towards the update that we are looking to do for a better constructed house. As I mentioned before, heartbreak can cause the condition of your heart to become rough and to become callous, and you may find yourself relating to people from that way of being. Dissect why you do that and come out of agreement with that through asking and answering the questions like I had mentioned before, and answer them earnestly. Who, what, when, where, why, how. Those are tried and true. They will get you somewhere. Together, intention, decision, commitment, and execution of each of these will get you in motion towards having this gift of love. It is going to create the space for that. It's choosing to look at your raw self every day without judgment, but with vision for change. So you start with that. Pray asking God to reveal yourself to you. That is one of the best prayers that you could ever ask the Lord is, Lord, I know I have blind spots. I know there are things that I'm not seeing. Can you reveal me to me? Show me. Show me the ways that I'm going wrong, because I know my heart is not correct. I know my heart is not righteous. I know it's not. I know it's deceptive. The things that I'm feeling, the things that I'm saying, the ways that I'm reacting from, I know it's deceptive. Reveal me to me, God. Show me. And sometimes God will use others to do that. And sometimes he will tell you straight up in your face. You know, the Lord has actually used all of those tools for me. Sermons do it for me. People do it for me. Relationships do it for me. I have been learning so much this year about me through others. And it's not the me that I thought I was. I thought I was one person, and I found out the way that I was showing up was completely different. Review what you feel and what you are responsible for in your relationships and how that aligns with God's vision for your life. And then probe those behaviors until you are out of agreement with them. Start there. Thank you for loving yourself first so you can then go and love your neighbor. Until next time.
Why don't you stay a little longer? You like what you like, right? Subscribe to the channel so we can spend a little more time together, and maybe comment your thoughts because I care what you're thinking. Love is the risk and the reward.